We're in Rolling Hills Asylum, where a heavy metal door mysteriously slammed shut. So I sent Aaron in to investigate.
Look in there. Is somebody in there? What's in here?
Nothing but a room and a door, dude.
This is the first time that we have actually eyewitnessed and captured a heavy steel door slam shut.
I personally have never had an experience, but 2 years ago I had a close family member pass away, and I hadn't really told anybody. And that weekend, an ex-girlfriend of mine had a psychic party at her house, and the psychic basically mentioned to her, your closest ex-boyfriend had someone in his family pass away, and she messaged me on Facebook and asked me, and it was just really creepy, and there's no way she could have known. So I did believe in stuff like that after this experience.
Some friends of mine and I were staying at a Boy Scout camp because my friend is the caretaker of the camp in the off season, and we were all staying in different cabins, and we're all up late in the main house making dinner and stuff, hanging out, and it's a summer camp, so we're like, those sleepaway camp slasher movies. We're like, hey Dave, tell us any stories. Has anything bad happened here? He's like, you guys really don't want to joke about that. We're like, why? What's up? And he said, well, I think there's a female presence at the camp, because every time I close up at night and I close everything out, there's always like a single light on in one of the girl cabins across the lake. And when I get over there, I can't get in because the bed is pushed right up against the door. So I have to like shoulder the door open and shimmy in and turn the light off. And he's like, at first I thought kids were doing it, and then I realized that all the windows are still closed and none of them are broken or anything. And we're like, oh, that's kind of weird. He's like, yeah, it gets worse. And we're like, oh God, no. And he said, every once in a while, he'll be looking out across the camp, and not only will a light in one of the girl cabins go on, but they'll start to switch. Like they'll start to go on different, not like total techno, but like they keep switching back and forth. And he said, there's no way anybody's running back and forth fast enough. And the idea that people are out there and like communicating with each other, like your turn, it doesn't make any sense. So
my first paranormal experience, I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I had been sick, and I was laying in bed, and I remember I used to always get this weird feeling when I was about to get sick that my bed was gonna suck me in. So I had been sick for a couple of days, and I woke up and I looked, and at the foot of my bed was this elderly woman standing there, and she was holding something, and she was just kind of rocking it, and I didn't freak out.
In 1995, I was a security guard at Cottage. One evening, I was in a security office with a maintenance man. On that camera, I saw an image of a gentleman. I saw an image of a man standing there looking into a pet store that used to be here. The place was closed down tight. It was nighttime. All the alarms were on, and nothing went off. The maintenance man and I looked at each other, looked back at the camera, saw the gentleman. I came down here. Time I came down here, there was nobody here. And the maintenance man said that he just disappeared off the camera, just vanished. That's my ghost.
The only one I know know is from a night watchman that used to work in building number 1 when the food court was there. And he was patrolling, as he did every night. And he said without fail, he would hear an elevator all of a sudden start. He would hear the motor. He could hear it go from one floor to the other floor, even though there's only 3 floors, and stop. And then a couple of seconds later, the door would open, and then the door would shut, and then hear the elevator again. He said there was nobody around, ever. He never heard footprints, he never felt any presence, but he always heard the elevator. And they had the cables checked. They had people come down to look at the apparatus to see if it was working properly. Nothing was malfunctioning. It was just this elevator started by itself and went down 3 floors and then turned around and went back up. The whole library on North Street, if you look to the left of it, there's a little alley. And it goes all the way back to the next road. The house to the left of that was a family there back in the 1600s, and they had a little girl by the name of Abigail. And Abigail died of an infected tooth. She had a raging infection, and it went to her brain and went in her bloodstream or whatever, and she died. She was probably about 7 years old. And ever since then, people have seen her in a white nightgown on the 2nd floor middle window looking out. In fact, one time, some painters recently were hired to go paint the house. And they were knocking at the door, and nobody was answering. And then they happened to look up, and there was this little girl looking out the window. And this was probably back in the 60s, the 60s or the 70s, so it was in fairly recent history. So Abigail's been in that house for many centuries, and that's all I know.
When my mother died a couple years ago, she adored this stuffed animal that actually sung. It's strange, but it was a song called "I Want to Be Loved by You," and she would play it all the time, and that was her favorite stuffed animal. The batteries had run out and was gone for a while, and so she couldn't play it for a couple of years. The day after she died, the animal started to sing. Until I took a class in college. It was called Stalking the Wild Mind. It was really cool. And this professor, Professor Barron, was this crazy guy, and he came in and told us all sorts of stuff. He's like, I'm a water diviner, and people often ask me if I can find treasure in their backyard, and the answer is yes. And I was just like, what? So he taught us how to do all this stuff, and I was able to find, water, but I think most people would be. But he was able, we hid stuff from him, and he found it. We'd be like, okay, here is, here's, somebody had like a fancy coin in their wallet that their grandpa had given them. And the kid went over and he put it in the grass somewhere in this big field. And so the kid knew where it was so he could get it back. And then we sent Professor Barron out. We're like, okay, it's somewhere on this field. And we had a map of the field, and Barron was like, do over the map. He's like, it is over near that oak tree. And we were just like, are you kidding me right now? He's like, no, I bet I can walk you to it. And he just walks forward and he goes, it should be here. And he looks down and he's like, oh, there it is. And he gives it to us. We were like, are you nuts? So can I do those things? No. But it's really interesting seeing demonstrations like that and then trying to be like, none of that is possible. That's hard to do. So either he's the best magician ever, or there's more to this than we really think about.